He's never fought us. Not us united.
Someone died. Oh! My favorite moment in the entire... Maybe I should complicate this before I start speaking here. Welcome to Under Two Capes. I'm Jared, and how about that new intro I put together? Yeah, so it's a new era for DC, and it's a new era for Comics League. So I cut together a dope-looking intro and outro for the entire channel now. So live streams, everything is going to be that one intro because it's supposed to represent that all of these different shows, Under Two Capes, Snyder Saturdays or Sundays or whenever we have them, Indie Wednesday, all those are under the Comics League banner. So from now on, they're all going to have that dope intro. Now, going to the topic of this week, did DC just confirm they're doing a reboot? So for those of you that don't know, so the last issue of Dark Crisis comes out, I believe, in December. And also DC announced what's going to happen afterwards, after Dark Crisis. So essentially, it's going to be called Dawn of the DCU. Apparently, it's a new editorial era. It's a new publishing initiative. Now, what this indicates to me is that, okay, so first off, I just want to say one thing. The Dan Mora covers poster of the Justice League is some of the most gorgeous art I've ever seen. Can we just have him do art forever for DC, please? Because that dude is like a god of DC art. So, besides that, so first immediate thing that I want to indicate here, that I want to point out, is that it looks to me that it's a return to a more classic era. It's essentially like Rebirth was. And what do I mean by that? If you look at the Mora covers, it's that Mora poster of the cover gallery that has like the Justice League. It's all the classic members of the Justice League. It's none of the like John Kent. It's none of the derivative heroes that ultimately the readership doesn't care about. It's Clark Kent Superman, not John Kent. Diana Prince Wonder Woman. You know, a Cyborg is with Nightwing and Starfire on the Teen Titans. So that's interesting. We have Hal Jordan, and it looks like Wally West or Barry Allen, whichever one, but there's a Flash. It's one of the male Flashes. Wonder Woman is Diana, not Yara. And Aquaman looks like they're returning him to his old look without the beard and long hair. So that's an interesting way to do it. I believe they even said they were changing his appearance in the Aquaman movie universe. So I guess that kind of aligns. And so first I want to talk about a little bit about this in general, why a reboot was needed. And then I'm going to get into what I want in this new reboot. In other words, what I think would serve DC best. That's the way I'm going to structure this episode. So first, why does it need a reboot? Because here's the thing. For a long time, since I would honestly say, I mean, the first time I observed how messed up DC's continuity was probably during Doomsday Clock, because here's why. Doomsday Clock was happening, and it wasn't Black Label, so we were led to believe to a certain degree that it was canon. Then you have Death Metal happening at the exact same time. And then you have Three Jokers, and you have this. There were too many events happening presumably at the same time, or they didn't give us enough of an indication of when these events took place. So you had all these contradictory events happening at the exact same time. That's the issue there. Because it's like, come on, I'm like, guys, you could easily just give me a timeline. Release a timeline that says, okay, so Three Jokers is here. This is the Three Jokers. They have a little bit more leeway because it was a Black Label book, and they kind of left it ambiguous yet about if it's canon or not. But Death Metal and Doomsday Clock is inexcusable. Now, so that's the first thing. Second off, these characters are acting not like themselves. Superman's not acting like himself. But Batman's definitely not acting like himself. Like when that one writer had him pass by a group of looters and let them go on looting. That is not Batman. He has a very extremist view when it comes to crime. No matter what, you're a criminal. And actually, I started reading Tom King's Batman, and say which one about Tom King's Batman, he kind of emphasizes that point. So so it's like you don't understand Batman. That's the problem. They had too many writers that put their own personal agendas through the characters. Lord knows Tom King did that. That's another thing. What I think is gonna if this marketing is accurate, if it remains accurate, because then again it could change. And quite honestly, it's DC we're talking about, so it could very well change. If it stays like this, it looks like they're. First off, Tavia, you should be pretty happy. If this stays, if this could be an indicator of what they're doing, because it looks like they're going to have Superman. If this was a complete reboot, now here's the thing. I'm operating under the assumption that this is going to be a complete new 52 style reboot. Now, I'm also going to talk about in this episode the difference between a new 52 and a rebirth, because it could be a rebirth style reboot. But anyway, going back to what I'm talking about. If this is a complete reboot, this could be how they de-age John Kent. Because the new continuity, they don't have to necessarily start like from scratch, and you can see like like Superman crashing on Earth. I do know that that there's rumors that they're going to start Batman over from #1, so it could be. But what they could do is not necessarily show the origin again. Do it kind of like Matt Reeves did with the Batman movie. You know the origins of at least Batman and Superman and maybe Wonder Woman at this point. You can just watch the movie. So just have them start. Like they could have Superman and Lois Lane raising old boy John Kent. They could have Batman with Damian. What you could do is in the issue 1, just say they've been hit superheroes for a while. I repeat, do not put a numeral value, because here's the problem. When they did the new 52, their issue was they marketed it as a complete reboot. Okay, that's fine. But they said, okay, so Batman's history is now condensed into 5 years. So he's had his back broken by Bane, went through 5 Robins. Green Lantern had Blackest Night, which doesn't make sense because a lot of these characters don't exist in this new universe. But that's the thing. That's what I think is going to happen. I think they're going to essentially, if it's a complete reboot, if it's a hard new 52 style reboot, what I think they're going to do is they're going to essentially, in the new continuity, when the stories start, they will have been superheroes for like a long time, and they won't put like a numeral value on it. They'll just say, okay, so Batman's been Batman for a while. That way they can reference the other stories, but they don't have to worry about he's gone through 5 Robins in like 4 years. That doesn't make sense. That way you avoid that. Same thing with Superman. They could have he's had John Kent for a while. They could at least say he's been Superman for John Kent. They don't have to necessarily keep showing whenever they start the universe over. I mean, I get the idea about why they want to do that, so they can bring in new readers. So I guess that's a way they can do it. But let's say they do a complete new 52 style reboot and want to show the origins again. They cannot. They have to show everything from, if they're going to show the origins again. In other words, if they're going to start at like Clark Kent's rocket landing or Bruce Wayne's parents getting shot, they have to take this slow. They have to build up. They can redo like the stories of like Jason Todd, Dick Grayson, and all that stuff. And but they have to take their time. That was the problem with the new 52, particularly with Batman and Green Lantern. Because I understand why they did it, because there were so many fans of Green Lantern and Batman, and I loved. I'm on the 3rd omnibus of Jeff Johns' Green Lantern. I have the other 2 behind me, and my gosh, is that fantastic comic book writing. But my point is that I understand why they wanted to keep the Green Lantern and Batman, because those were the 2 things that were selling at the time. Because Jeff Johns had Green Lantern, and then you had Batman's being Batman. But I think that what they should do is start from scratch. Retell those stories. You can definitely retell those stories. You can retell Nightfall. You can retell a new version of Blackest Night. Because imagine Blackest Night with all the new characters that have been created since then. That could actually be really cool. So don't try and cram too much into this reboot. If you're starting at number 1, start at number 1. Don't try and fit in like 5 Robins in like all of Batman's Robins in like 5 years. It doesn't work. Now, another thing that I really want, and also looks like they're going back to the traditional team-ups, because Cyborg, if you look at the character posters with the Teen Titans, Robin, Nightwing, and Starfire. So it could be that they had their whole thing with him on the Justice League. It was pretty controversial with fans. I enjoyed it, but I could see why some people thought he's more of a Teen Titan. So I can see why he'd be on the team, on the Teen Titans. It looks like, so for Wonder Woman, so one of the things that I really want, if they're going to restart this, is put a competent team on Wonder Woman, because she hasn't had that arguably since Greg Rucka and Liam Sharp in Rebirth. She hasn't had a competent team. Remember, the last time we had a Wonder Woman event, it was War of the Amazon, it was like Trial of the Amazons, and it sucked. They need to put a competent team on Wonder Woman and because here's the thing, this character is like the most recognizable female superhero of all time. Captain Marvel doesn't come close to Diana Prince. The problem is that when you look at her comic books, there's either too many contradictions. There you go. Right. Decide on an origin. I prefer she was the daughter of Zeus, because I think that adds a lot more to her character, and it's easier to grasp than I was molded by clay by my mother. I can see why people like the clay origin, but I prefer the Zeus origin too. But give her a competent team, so maybe we can get some legendary, because here's the thing, Wonder Woman doesn't have the level of famous storylines that Batman and Superman do, and she's a member of the Trinity, so she should have that. For Aquaman, I would just essentially, really, I wouldn't change that much on Aquaman. I would, again, competent writer, just need a competent writer. For Green Lantern, stop adding on stupid lanterns. Like, if I were you, don't put Teen Lantern in there, and don't put Far Sector. In other words, don't pick or at least fix their origins, so you don't have like one hacking a Green Lantern that is dumb as hell, or one that's like, I passed my mother passed her lantern ring on to me. That's not how it works. That is not how it works. And additionally, what I would do is for Green Lantern, stop trying to change Hal. It's really annoying when like the writers haphazardly say, okay, so this character is this character is this. Just stop. For the Flash, you don't really have to do that much for the Flash, because what I've heard, his book is fantastic. So really, just keep doing what you're doing. In terms of Superman, you need a competent writer for this. Eliminate all traces of Brian Michael Bendis. I cannot stress that enough. Eliminate it all, starting with the John Kent age thing. Reform the Super Sons. You can do that. But eliminate anything Bendis did. Literally everything. De-Bendis Superman, because he has contributed nothing of value to the character. Nothing. And he was on the character for like years, and it was abysmal. You completely wipe Brian Michael Bendis' influence completely from DC. Everything that man has done, burn it, destroy it. To quote Loki, destroy everything. And then for Batman, understand his strict no crime policy. And by the way, one more thing, maybe we can actually implement my meritocracy system. Probably won't, but my meritocracy system of saying that you start off on like a lower tier DC character when you first come to DC, because you want to hire new talent, that's fine, but you have to prove yourself before you can write for like any member of the Justice League. You don't get to write for Hal Jordan, Bruce Wayne, Diana Prince, any of the characters that anyone cares about. You don't get to write when you first come in. Even if you poach someone from Marvel, because guess what? You had someone like Bendis who could write for Marvel but can't write for DC. So you have to start off in like like maybe a street level character. Then if you can write well, then you can graduate up to like a Batman, a Superman, a Wonder Woman. And then stop trying, eliminate the whole idea of the legacy characters, because ultimately here's the problem with the legacy characters. And this is more so true for DC than Marvel. When you think of Superman, you think of Clark Kent. You don't think about John Kent. When you think about Batman, you think of Bruce Wayne, not Jace Fox. You don't think of Yarflor for Wonder Woman, Teen Lantern, or Far Sector for Green Lantern. You really think of either Hal Jordan, you think of Hal Jordan, Guy Gardner, Kyle Rayner, John Stewart, and to a lesser extent, Jessica Cruz and Simon Bass. You don't think of that the other two. Oh, another thing for the Green Lantern: stop adding on Lantern cores. Restore the ones that Jeff Johns created and leave it at that. Stop with the gold and the stupid ultraviolet core. That was so dumb. Now, you may be wondering, I talked about if it's a complete reboot. What happens if it's a rebirth style? Now, here's what I mean by that. A hard reboot, the New 52 style reboot that I was talking about, that essentially means they're starting off and making and saying, assume we never published a comic book. We're starting these characters. Assume we just invented Superman. That's essentially the hard reboot. The soft reboot, which is more what they did with Rebirth, was essentially through some cosmic shenanigans, restore certain parts of the universe. In Rebirth, they used Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen and said that he screwed around with the DC timeline and took 5 years away from these characters, messed in the past and changed the future, and then he undid it. That's how you can essentially do if you're doing it like that, there's any number of ways you can fix the universe. You can essentially have it where you have a cosmic being do it, and then just restores the DC to, I would say, post death metal. Honestly, is where I would place it. And then in terms of that's honestly where I think where DC started to go downhill was after death metal, because you had that Infinite Frontier, which was dumb because that's when they let all the writers do whatever they want. You also need to hire some freaking editors. That's another thing, but. Going on, either one of the reboots, if it's a soft or a hard reboot, either one can work and can actually contribute to some to a healthy universe. In other words, you don't have to do a hard reboot. I prefer the hard reboot because I think at this point it would be just too confusing for people. Just wipe the slate clean. I think DC honestly needs that because their continuity is too convoluted. And if you go the route of Rebirth, I fear it's just going to get more convoluted. Because here's the thing. When they went to Rebirth, it was essentially the New 52 style Earth, but they restored a couple of things. And the New 52 at that point was convoluted. So really at that point, they need to essentially just start over. You can have the Super Sons, you can have all that stuff that people like, but start over. That's really the best way I could see stuff happening. Now, just one more thing I really want to emphasize, by the way, is that with these Dan Mora posters, it's really interesting to see that all of the characters that are front and center right now are not the legacy characters. It's the traditional Justice League. Now, here is the question there. Does that mean that the other characters are going to be put on the back burner, or are they not going to exist or be redone in terms of John Kent? In other words, are they going to revert them back to Wonder of Yarflor being Wonder Girl or something like that, or John Kent being Superboy? Are they going back to that and having Clark Kent Superman be the main Superman? Or if they go the Rebirth route, what they could do, first off, they could still de-age John Kent Tevye. Second off, I think what they could do is essentially and I've said this for a while when Zaslav took over, that I think what they're going to do is that the only Superman book is going to be the Superman book's going to be about Clark Kent only. Superman in Action are going to be about Clark Kent only, not John Kent. He's not going to have his own book. Jace Fox is not going to have her own book. Unfortunately, Yarflor is not going to have her own book. Only the characters that you think of when you think of Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and such are going to have their books. That's it. You could have John Kent show up in the book, Jace Fox show up briefly in the book and just be like a background character. They'll if they still exist, they'll be background characters. But I honestly think, based upon Zaslav's own statements when he's talked about DC, I think they're going back, honestly, in the era that I really, really, really love DC, when you only had one version of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. I think that Zaslav doesn't want multiple versions of the characters because that's confusing as hell. And by multiple versions, I mean Clark Kent, John Kent, Superman. No, it's just Clark Kent, Superman, John Kent, Superboy. At least they'll do that, or they'll just have Connor Kent be Superboy and have John Kent have his own identity. That would be a good idea too. But that's really there. So in terms of essentially, in terms of, do I think DC can pull this off? Because that's the $1 million question. Because it really doesn't matter if they promise all the stuff in the reboot. Can they actually execute? I think they can't. Okay. I think maybe. Here's what's giving me a little bit more of hope too, is that Jeff Johns is coming back to do like the so he's doing Flashpoint Beyond and he's doing his JSA series. Here's why that's giving me hope. Is showing that DC is making an effort to bring back their top tier talent that made DC. That's one thing I was forever saying, please do. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of great new talent like Dan Mora. I mean, he's newer, which Dan Mora, I'm convinced, is one of the greatest DC artists of all time. He's up there. His Batman Superman book and just the way he renders the Justice League, that is just, I honestly cannot like geek out about Dan Mora anymore, because it's like he is so good. It's really astounding, really, because it's like, dude, can you just draw all of these? Can you draw? I want a Dan Mora Justice League book. That's what I really want. I think that would be really cool. But now, what I think is actually really cool. Now, here's the thing. I have hope. Now, I've always had hope for stuff. Hell, I'm a Snyderverse fan. I still think eventually we'll get Justice League Part 2 and 3. 5 years down the line, definitely, because of his Netflix stuff. But I do think eventually they'll bring him back. Not now, obviously, well, also because of the money issue. But beyond that, I'm just saying that I'm hopeful for a lot of stuff. This news. Now, let's assume that all of this is what it appears to be, that they're going back to the traditional DC. About damn time, guys. Because for the longest time, DC has not felt like DC Comics, because they emphasize too much of like politics. And yes, that there's a time and a place for that, but it got too much. And comics has always been political. Yeah, but the writers and the stories have never like attacked people that disagreed with you. That's the difference. That's the difference, because yes, comics to a degree have always been political, but they haven't been as in your face too. It's been like, okay, you can take this as a political story or could not. But I'm not talking about politics on this show. That's one of the Comics League rules. But this is looking really good. Really good. Because I think here's the thing. After in Future State, when they announced when they showed the new JLA and stuff, and they kept those characters around, this is the first thing I said when I saw that. I was like, they're doing all new, all different DC. In fact, I think I labeled one of the earlier Under Two Capes episodes as all new, all different DC, because that's what it'll look like. Because for those of you that don't know, in 2015 or so, Marvel had this initiative called All New, All Different, which essentially what it was is they replaced all the main characters like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor with Jane Foster, Thor, Sam Wilson, Captain America, Riri Williams, Ironheart, Carol Danvers with Ms. Marvel, Carol Danvers with Kamala Khan, and tanked the company, because ultimately it's like you took these characters that had their own identities, and that's the problem with a legacy character, is that you essentially tie like those characters to that identity, and it doesn't work. Essentially, Lord knows that. Lord knows that. Here's the problem. Lord knows that's not working for DC, because you have John Kent, and arguably, some people. I've had people argue that Son of Kal-El is actually pretty good, and that's fine. You can argue that all you want, but the general consensus of that book is that it's not good. It's not good. That's just ultimately the point. How do I know this? Because they're going back. If people really loved John Kent as Superman, which I get it. It's like, well, yeah, comics are cyclical, and I get that they were always going to bring back Superman as Clark Kent. But here's the thing: it was nowhere near as popular, Son of Kal, as Super Sons was. That was, I remember when Rebirth was going down, people were raving about that book, raving. It was no matter what was going on in Rebirth, Super Sons was universally beloved. I still have to read it. I'm going to buy the omnibus and I'm going to read it. And then Tevi's going to come on the channel. We're going to talk about it. But it was I didn't hear a single bad thing about Super Sons. And DC replaced it, canceled it, and then aged up John Kent and then ruined him essentially because Bendis wanted to do that because Bendis was going to Bendis. So I'm like, okay, guys. And here's the thing. DC is trying to, here's the thing. These comic book companies, they're trying to essentially capitalize on the popularity of their movies. That was the problem with All New, All Different too. It came out, it happened in the peak of the MCU. So essentially you would have stories of guys going, okay, so I just saw Thor Dark World, let's say. Now, I know that happened earlier, but it's the same concept. You see Thor Dark World. You're like, okay, I've never read a comic book, but you know what? I like that Thor movie. I'm going to go buy a Thor comic. You show up in the comic book shop. You pick up a Thor comic. Who the hell is this girl? Guess what? That was happening. And particularly, and here's the thing, particularly with Zaslav. He recognizes that Superman, for one thing, is the single most identifiable symbol in the world. DC has the largest icons in the world, pop cultural icons. When someone picks, let's say they eventually come out with Man of Steel 2, and they want to go read a Superman comic, and they pick up Son of Kal-El. They're going to be like, well, yeah, it has Son on it, but they're going to pick up the Superman book and see John Kent. I'm like, this isn't Clark. Or Batman. Jace Fox isn't Batman. You see what I'm saying? They could be good characters, but ultimately, if you're trying to get a larger audience, you have to, unless you have a John Kent movie, which is never going to happen because he's nowhere near as popular as his father. Unless you have a John Kent movie, you're not going to get a John Kent. From now on, I don't think you're going to get a John Kent book. Because here's the thing. These corporations want synergy. Arguably, the MCU is going away from that because they're trying to all do all different thing in the movies, and that's not working. But DC is going for synergy, which means based upon this poster, it looks like they're going back and saying, no, we're going to have Clark Kent, Bruce Wayne, Diana Prince, Hal Jordan, Wally West, or Barry Allen. It's hard to tell from that poster. It looks like Wally West in his all red suit, which I'm fine either way because I love both Flashes, and the traditional look for Aquaman. Looks like DC is going back to basics. They're like, okay, you know what? We strayed from our path a little bit. Let's just go back to basics. That's the best way to do it. That is the most fantastic way to do it. And honestly, that's the best way to capitalize on your movies. Because if you have a new, here's the good part. DC is trying to essentially, in a way, restart their cinematic universe and get it running again. If you reboot the comic books at the same time and make it so it's a really easy entry point for anyone, and this is also interesting because DC is also advertising the comics at the end of the trailers too. I saw that and I was like, thank God they're doing that finally. If you combine all those points, you have the movies that are popular and a jumping on point. Then you have the advertising for the comic books. And if the comic books, A, reflect the movies, and B, are good quality, guess what? It's more likely that someone's going to go to the movies and say, these are based on comic books. I'm going to go to one of those stores and check it out. They show up, they open up a Superman book, and they're reading about Clark Kent, and they're like, oh, this is cool. I like this. I'm going to read that Batman book, and then that Wonder Woman book. See? It eventually snowballs. DC, okay, from the outside, DC looks like they're doing all the things I told them to do. So I'm like, yes, DC is obeying me. I now have powers to control DC. So happy. That's what this is looking like. I'm very excited for DC right now. It's back to basics, and that's everything DC needs. Say which one. I love the new 52, but arguably it changed too much, and that's what they changed too much away from the from the traditional DC, and that's why people hated it to a major degree. Then they had to bring in Rebirth. When you tried to bring that stuff back in and combine with the New 52, it convoluted it. This one, if they're doing a complete reboot, it's like, nope, we're going right back to, like, I would say the best continuity, the best way to go back, the best version of these characters post-Crisis, because that's when you had a lot of the best DC stories of all time, like Blackest Night, Multiversity. You had Flashpoint to a certain degree. You had Superman, All-Star Superman. Arguably, that wasn't canon, but whatever. You had any story in Grant Morrison's JLA book. You had, let's see, what else? You had JLA Tower of Babel. You had Batman: The Long Halloween. Batman Hush. The point is, most of DC's best modern stories are in the post-Crisis. So if you actually try and base this off the post-Crisis continuity, and honestly, the post-Crisis continuity fits the darker-ish tone of the movies really well. So if you match those, you have fantastic synergy. And looks like they're doing it. So this is finally we're getting some good news out of DC, because honestly, it's been quite a slog. Because it's like, okay, guys. They made so many bad decisions the past couple of years that I'm just like, okay, guys, this really sucks. Now to see them going back to the era, seemingly going back to the iteration of DC that I've grown up loving and reading and watching, it fills me up with hope. And I will definitely be checking out the number ones for all. If they do like a new 52 style thing where all the JLA people get number ones, I'm gonna buy all of them. I want all of them, because I'm gonna start this, because this really gets me so like jazzed up about the future of DC, because they have the opportunity here to essentially bring the fan base together like they could never do so before. Plus, just and one more thing, I just want to emphasize enough: give Dan Mora more work, because that dude is awesome. Now, on that note, I'm not going to end this episode, but I really want to transition real quick. Actually, no. One more thing that's interesting here I want to bring up. I'm going to share my screen. I do not want to transition the topic, because here's the interesting thing. So in the issue that's about Dawn of the DCU, Nightwing is like, seems to be the focal point of it in front of the different worlds of the multiverse. That's interesting. So for those of you remember, in Death Metal, Wonder Woman was the focal point, and then she got like all these god powers from the essentially gods of the multiverse. And so that could be what it is. It could be that Nightwing's gonna be the next focal point, or it's just he's part of it. Another thing that I definitely like is that it seems like they're doing a bunch of like stories in the universe that are like one-offs and stuff. Like they're doing one about the badass Superman, Batman, Green Lantern mix. I think they're doing one about, what is it about? They're doing like a one shot about Stan Lee's Earth for Earth 6 for his birthday. Just by the way, look at these Dan Mora like pictures, and I believe I'm going to use the poster for this as my thumbnail, because this just looks amazing. All the colors and everything Dan Mora renders just looks amazing. Then we also have like the reference to Final Crisis, where Batman died. But geez, it looks really, really, really cool. And I'm trying to find another thing here, but yeah, it looks like Nightwing is going to be like the focal point of the new event here. All right, so I'm going to read this article on Screen Rant that's talking about it. So it says here, in a new preview of Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths #7 by Joshua Williamson, blah, 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 the heroes of Earth, including the recently returned JSA, will have defeated the Great Darkness and Pariah, big surprise, as the final war will begin against Deathstroke and his dead Dark Army. I love how Deathstroke was manipulated by like the darkness and he's like the main bad guy. That is so cool as a Deathstroke fan. In a press release, Williamson revealed that the event's finale will be the darkness before the dawn, referring to a new dawn of the DC universe. The Dark Crisis writer said that the issue began with death but will end with life. At the end of the event, we'll launch the DCU into a new exciting direction. Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths will feature a main cover with a slew of variants, including among the new things by Clayman, blah, 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 blah. The synopsis of Dark Crisis teases the battle ahead and reveals the shocking conclusion. The shocking conclusion will launch the DCU into 2023. So it says here, the Great Darkness is defeated, but the final war has only just begun. Between the remaining heroes and Deathstroke's Dark Army, who will be left standing? The Justice League and the Infinite Earths have returned. Big surprise, but at what cost? Do not miss the shocking conclusion that launches the DCU into 2023. Yeah, but it definitely looks like we're gonna get everything going back to normal. Let's see. It'll be fascinating to see what. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see essentially what the new universe looks like, because it'll be how much of the universe has changed. I know, we'll see. I also want to see if DC will commit to this, because as I mentioned earlier in this episode, DC has a tendency of not committing to things and then undermining them later. Snyderverse, the New 52, the minute someone freaks out. And it's really annoying, and I really hope that DC, when they go with this new exciting direction in 2023, that they stick to it, and that they essentially say, okay, so this is the way the universe is going to look like. They're not going to like. What I mean by that, people don't like it. They're not going to do another confusing soft reboot to throw in a bunch of stuff that people tweet about. And honestly, DC, ignore Twitter, because the people that are tweeting about, oh, I ship this character with this character, with this character, with this character. No, they're not the ones that buy comics. I want John Kent to be with Damian Wayne. They don't buy comics. They do not. They absolutely do not. The people that would be tweeting at you if you undo John Kent and Jay do not buy comics. Or at least not enough of them buy them to justify keeping that around. So there you go. I'm just going to give you there, right there. But that's what I can give you there. Ignore Twitter. That's really the best way that I think DC could advance. Just ignore Twitter. And ultimately, focus on the comic sales. And use the comic sales as essentially an indicator if the book is popular. If it's not selling well, I mean, one issue dip, okay, that's fine, because you could have that, and then you could recover from that. In other words, if, like, let's say they do 2 issues of a series, it's doing great, and then 1 issue bombs. Obviously, don't cancel a book, because you can always course correct. But if it starts to become a trend, cancel the book. Like, actually cancel it. Don't worry about backlash or anything like that. Cancel the book. Because ultimately, you're just wasting your writer's time, your artist's time, you're wasting your characters. You're just doing damage to the brand. And that's another thing. That's why I think that they're going back to the classic DC Justice League and the classic DC universe, because they recognize that, guess what? At least the new regime, the brand was damaged with the direction that DC was going in. Their sales were tanking hard, and the images of these characters were tarnished. That's why, honestly, I think they're going to do a hard reboot, because they can just say all that stuff that people hated, it's gone. It's wiped away. It never existed. Superman never gave away his secret identity because Brian Michael Bendis was too lazy to write Superman with a secret identity. Yes, it was laziness. It was ultimately it was laziness that had him reveal his identity. That's it. It was laziness. I feel like Zaslav now is saying, okay, so we're going to go back to what made DC, what made DC popular. We're going to get these talents. We're going to go back to the normal version of the characters, and we're good to go. That's it. Point is, right now, I am very excited for what for the direction DC is going in, and I think it's going to be very fun as we get closer to get more of an indication of what the new universe is going to be, what the new rules are going to be, what they can modify some of the origins as long as they keep the basic plot. And I'm interested to see what the new universe is going to look like, how much of the old pre-reboot universe is kept around, or if it's just wiped completely clean. Because that'll be interesting to see what they do. And I'm actually going to leave it at that. I think that's a good place to leave the episode. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Hope you guys enjoy my new clips. There's going to be a new intro in the beginning of this episode, and then there's going to be a new outro as soon as I outro out the show. In terms of what's coming up next in the content, on Sunday, Nick from the Phoenix Press and I will be reviewing. We'll be on Snyder Sunday talking about the movie A Sucker Punch live, so you'll be able to come in live and interact with us. And then on Saturday, I'm thinking about doing a Q&A. If that's something you guys would be interested in, drop in the comments and I'll do that. And we're gonna do the Snyder essentially trivia night on a future date. That way I can actually get more of the panel on, more of the traditional panel. I can get Nick, I can get Taladia, I can get some people on here that will, and you guys on there too. Okay, and in terms of Indie Wednesday, I'm thinking of doing more Invincible, really, because that was really popular. I enjoyed reading it, and it was super fun to talk about. And thank you guys for talking about Geiger so much, because that was honestly a really good read. Thank you again to Massio V2 for talking about it. Honestly, no, I could also talk about Spawn if you guys want. And I could also talk about Wildcats from Jim Lee. There's so many indie books that I've been reading that I'm going to review on the channel, because I think that'll be really fun. So that's what we have to look forward to on Indie Wednesday. And then for Sunday, for the Monday video, let me know what you guys want to see. Anyway, stay heroic, everyone. I will see you in the next episode. See you later.